My name is Hannah Boleyn and I did the MA Commercial Songwriting and Production course. I chose Tileyard education because I went to see a lovely friend of mine called Jez Ashurst, who is an incredible songwriter. Actually, ironically, I wanted to move away from being an artist and into being a songwriter, and I'm now back to being an artist, but that's another story. And I didn't know how to get into songwriting, and he suggested the course at Tileyard, really first and foremost because of the network that would hopefully give me a door into, and he turned out to be right, so great recommendation, thank you Jez. I think for me, I knew what I wanted to get out of it from the offset, and for me that was finding people to collaborate with. So I spent my time trying to work with everyone, and once I had met people that I worked well with, I pestered them to do more sessions together. I'm a big believer in the best way to learn songwriting is by doing. So I tried to write as much as possible with as many people as possible. And if I was going to go back and do it again, I would do the same thing again. I think my favourite thing about Tileyard, the community, is essentially the community. I love going to Vinyl Cafe and bumping into people that, you know, you've maybe not seen or spoken to for a while and being like, oh my God, we should jump in the room together. I think particularly going through lockdown, it taught us all how important it is to see people in real life and to have those genuine connections with people. And I think Tileyard's such a lovely place to have really organic interactions and reminds me I'm not all alone. So yeah, that I guess. When we did the mentorship program, I had Charlie Arm from Tileyard Music as my mentor, and he was incredibly generous, not only with his time, but with his advice. He was, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, very blunt with his advice, which I really appreciated. And once I think he'd got to know me, he actually started putting me in a few sessions and making introductions to some of the writers on his roster and some of the other people that were working for Tileyard Music at the time. And I've kept a lot of those relationships. I still work with some of those writers. I stay in touch with some of those A&Rs, even if they're not at Tileyard Music anymore. So that was one of the biggest doors that was opened for me, and I'm still really grateful to Charlie for that. My first ever dance feature I wrote with Amrit when I was on the course. DNA, I think it was after lockdown, but I had a Zoom session because there were a couple of people I had been working with on Zoom regularly and it had been working really well. So I had a Zoom session with a guy called Nathan Nicholson, who's an amazing writer and friend and collaborator. And I'd been to a meeting and I was walking home from the meeting, and this sounds really corny, but it was genuinely one of those walking down the street, and I still have the voice note where I just had this idea and I was like, loving you is in my DNA. I think it was like baby or something corny like that. And I just thought, oh, this is kind of hooky. Maybe we can write this today. So we jumped on Zoom and I sang the idea to Nathan and he said, yeah, great. We thought it would be cool at a house tempo, so we wrote it at 1 to 8 BPM. It felt really easy to write, I think because we had the concept and the kind of core lyric down. So we wrote it pretty quickly and it felt like a pretty solid record. I had been working with a Dutch producer called Freak at the time, who was working with Sam Felt and Jonas Blue on their Endless Summer project. And I then had a session with him where he said, do you have any ideas for this project? And I said, yeah, actually, I've been working on this record, sent it to him. He was like, this is perfect. I'm gonna produce it up with another guy. They produced it up, again at house tempo, got sent over to, I think, Jonas Blue. And as with many things, there was silence from that point on. So assumed they weren't interested. But felt like I had something cool. So continued to pitch the song out. And about 6 months later, I went to ADE, which if you're into dance music, I thoroughly recommend going, and met an A&R for Atlantic and swapped details, and he said, send me some records. So I sent him some records, and I've done this so many times and not had a response, or it's led to nothing, but it's always worth doing. He came back to me and said, I love this DNA song, give me a week. And within a week, he had sent back the version that turned out to be the version that we ended up releasing. And he said, I can't tell you who it is because I haven't finished signing them yet, but I love this song and I want this record. And the version, they'd sped my vocal up to 140 BPM. It was a completely different take on how it started, but I genuinely listened to it and went, I love this. This just feels great to me. There were other people interested in the record at the time, and we got to January and we had to make a decision whether to kind of wait for some of these bigger artists who were interested but hadn't done a version, or we went with the wild card on Atlantic and we didn't know who it was. And I just loved the version. So we said, let's gamble, because ultimately it's about the song feeling great. So we went with Atlantic. They then said, great, we've actually signed this guy, he's called Billy Gillies. So that all got done. The next thing that happened was I got sent the contract to sign, and I was listed as a writer and not as the featured vocalist. So I said to my team at the time, hey guys, think there's a mistake here. So they went back and said, hi, think there's a mistake. This should be Billy featuring Hannah Boleyn. And the label came back and said, we love Hannah, we love her voice and her songwriting, but we don't want to have her named on the song because this is going to be Billy's first release on a major label, and we think it will be confusing to his fans to have someone else named on the record. Which was not great news. So I was really upset by this, and this was we were February, March time by this time. And the one fortunate thing was this was around the same time as International Women's Day, where Atlantic had just done a huge post about how important it was to lift up women in the music industry and in the dance industry in particular. So I spoke to my manager and I said, I think it's really important that we highlight this to them. Firstly, I'm not a newcomer. I've done some really reputable features. I've written the song, I've vocaled the song. I deserve to have my name on this and I want to fight for this. So we put an email together and said to Atlantic, do we think that given we're trying to support women in this industry, using Hannah's vocals and songwriting to launch the career of a man and give her no credit for it is the right way to do that? And then I think I had a 24-hour wait for their reply, which I think I felt physically sick for the whole time and went through the full spectrum of they're going to tell me where to stick it and all the rest. And they came back after 24 hours and said, we'd love to have Hannah on the song. I do want to say, I know for a fact that this had nothing to do with Billy. I absolutely love Billy, he's an incredible guy, and it was not him, it was people at record labels making stupid decisions. I think it genuinely was a very short-sighted, we want to launch Billy, and we don't want to launch Billy featuring someone, we want it to be about him. And I get it wasn't personal, they didn't know me at the time, and to be fair, as soon as they had agreed to put my name on it, they put that behind them and we moved forward with it being our record together. So genuinely no hard feelings. I know it's business, but it's never nice to be told that you can't have your name on your own work. Yeah, that was February, March time. We then signed all the contracts and they kind of said, yeah, we're planning to release this song, we're really excited, but I was never given a release date or anything more than that. Ended up Then finally meeting Billy, because I hadn't met him at this point, got on with him really well. And then nothing really happened for a while until the July, I received an email from the label saying, this song has started going viral on TikTok and we're going to release it in 2 weeks, which I was pretty taken aback by. And essentially what happened is, because we'd signed it all, Billy had been playing at his shows. The song had been, one of the sets had been filmed on YouTube, uploaded to YouTube, and a fan had taken the sound from YouTube, put it on TikTok, and people had started sharing the sound and making videos to the sound. I don't think I was even barely on TikTok at this point. I think I'd maybe done a few videos that 5 people had watched. So I went onto TikTok and was like, oh my God, this sound's going viral. So the label were like, yeah, we're going to release it in 2 weeks. So I got a bit excited, but again, didn't know what to expect. The song got released and we didn't get any editorial playlisting on any of the DSPs, but I could see that people were going and listening to the song. And not only that, they were listening to it 3 or 4 times per person, which is boring stat stuff, but that's a really good indicator, apparently. So I could see that it was just gradually going up and people were listening to it multiple times. And it started on like, I think 30,000 streams a day, and then it go to 40 and then 50. And then Billy invited me to go and perform at Creamfields with him, which was the end of August. And I hadn't performed live for a really long time and I was terrified, but really excited. So went along to Creamfields, didn't really know what to expect. I went on stage and had a whole tent full of people singing the words back to me, and that was really the first moment where I went, okay, I think we've got something special here. And it then, every week, just slowly picked up and picked up. And it was really organic. The label didn't really get involved until much later in the game. We didn't go on the Radio 1 playlist until we got into the top 40. But although it was really stressful, because every week I was like, is this it? Has it peaked? Is everyone going to get bored of it now? It just kept going, and we stayed in the charts and eventually hit the top 10 in the following January. So it was incredible seeing how it built week on week. It also really taught me that the kind of old way of, oh, the first 2 weeks of a release are important, aren't true. If people love the song, stick with it. And yeah, it's completely kind of been life-changing for me in terms of my career. It's opened so many doors for me. I've also got a great relationship with Billy. We're working on our 3rd record together. Yeah, and it's been the most amazing journey. Some of the big key moments for me with DNA were, firstly, it going into the charts. I think it went in at like number 66 and I was over the moon with that. And we ended up going top 10. That was incredible. I've now got a platinum disc, which I gave to my parents for Christmas. So that's hanging on their wall, which again is another huge bucket list moment. We were on the A-list at Radio 1, at Capital. So there's all these stats. It was huge on TikTok, but for me, it's been the more obscure things, the messages I've had from people going, oh, I'm in an exercise class and your song's just been played. My mum was watching the England-Scotland rugby just recently and they were playing it at the stadium there. And I think the most bizarre pinch me one is there was a video of Tyson Fury training to the song, And then he actually posted a video of him singing the song in church. So that was pretty mental. So yeah, it's been amazing seeing the stats, but the real life ones have been the ones for me that have really been incredible. I've been told it's hit over 100 million streams, which is wild to me. I still remember really clearly having the goal of having one of my songs hitting over 1 million streams. So yeah, pretty grateful for that. So the song first was released in July 2023 and took 6 months, pretty much, to gain momentum and climb the charts, and ended up going top 10 in January 2024. Some of the key things I remember, both statistically and emotionally, once the song had been released, I very ashamedly watched my Spotify stats like a hawk, and one of the big metrics for me was the repeat listens. That was a huge indicator, and I know from then speaking to the marketing guys at the label that was really important. So that was a big learning curve for me. Also, having no editorial, no playlist support at all at the start, and seeing people actually going to the platform to listen to the song where they'd heard it on TikTok and going across the platform. I think when I performed at Creamfields, which was just over a month after the song had come out, we, I think, had our biggest day of streaming to date, which was 100,000 streams a day. I think when it hit its peak, it was doing close to 500,000 a day. And it took all of that time, and I remember speaking to friends and being like, people are going to get bored of it, surely they're going to get bored of it, and they're all going to lose interest and move on to the next thing. And it just kept growing a little bit and a little bit. And so it was really interesting to look at the stats and see that grow over time. But for me, it was, once we'd done Creamfields, Billy then asked me to do a bunch of other shows with him, and going and doing shows and hearing everyone sing every single word. I don't think there's any statistic that can replace going out and seeing real people connect with a record. So statistics are great, and they're obviously a great indicator, but for me, real people and their reaction is also hugely important. Very much from a songwriting perspective, I'm actually a huge ABBA fan, and I think they're quite famous for talking about how many hooks you should have in a record. And I think I have to give it to Billy when he took the top line and did his production around it. The intro has a little hook that, again, when we perform it live, everyone goes da-da, 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 da-da. So you've got people straight away with that hook. I think having a simple, repetitive melody on the chorus, I think the fact that the lyric was a little bit different but still really connected. I'm probably going off on a tangent here, but something I hadn't foreseen at all was I've had so many messages from people saying they sing it to their children, which I love. And so many people messaging me saying they've got married to the song and asking me to send them acoustic versions to walk down the aisle to. So there's a reason why we all write about love and relationships, right? It's because it's so relatable. So I think the combination of having a bunch of hooks in the song, I think Billy's production felt really fresh. I hate the word fresh, but it did. And somehow having a lyric that was a little bit different but still emotionally connected with people. I think it kind of ticked all of those boxes. I've never technically had the best vocal. I can't hit the highest note, I can't sing the loudest. I've worked with people who can wipe the floor with me vocally. And at some point I realised that the things that were my flaws also made my voice interesting. And leaning into that and going, this is what I do, this is what you get. If you want a Hannah vocal, you get the flaws, but you get the interesting quirks. And I think it was really about me leaning into who I am as an artist and as a vocalist, and not trying to emulate the way that someone else sings or the style of record that they would sing. So yeah, I think that's something that's been a really important learning thing for me. I'm always thinking about what can I write a song about, and so many of the ideas are so bad. Like, I remember being at a train station once and looking at a vending machine and being like, is there a song lyric in vending machine? There isn't, or not one that I've found. So part of that is, one of the things I do as an exercise is I look at songs that I love and I think about different ways that I can say the thing that they've said. So although it wasn't actually a thought process in the moment, I think subliminally, I don't know if that's the right word, I had thought about the song I Was Made for Loving You, and really loving you is in my DNA is just a different way of saying the same thing with different words in a different order. And it's an exercise that I try and do, where I try and look at a lyric that I love and think, is there a different way of saying that? Or famously, Miley Cyrus did it with Flowers, where she took a record and wrote her response to that record. So I think it can be a really interesting exercise, either if you're stuck for a concept, or just to do, I do it like I'm obsessive, so I'll do it while I'm getting ready in the morning. I'll think about songs that I love and go, can I say that in a different way? Can I say that in a different way? So it's just an interesting thought exercise, I guess. My advice to current students would be, firstly, enjoy it. It's great having the opportunity to be around all these creative people, and you never know who you're going to meet. So try and enjoy it, even though it's stressful and you've got deadlines. And I think I've probably banged on about this already, but just try to write as much as possible. Try to write with everyone, because you never know where you're going to find amazing collaborators. And even I've had experiences where I've done a session with someone and found it difficult, and then ended up working with them for a second time and found the way that we click and work together and written some great records with them. So give people a chance, try and work with everyone, write as much as possible. If you think you're writing a lot of songs, you're probably still not writing as many as you need to. I remember when people would say, oh, I write 5 songs a week, and I remember thinking, how can people possibly do that? And I've now had weeks where I've written 7 to 10 songs in a week. And most of those end up in the bin and are terrible, but you have to, I believe you have to do that to get to the good ones. So just every opportunity you get in the room and write with people. I would say one key takeaway for me from the course is, I think the most important thing to having success, 2 most important things. One is how hard you work. It's not about how talented you are, it's about how hard you work. And number 2, equally as important, is be nice.